As a longtime fan of the Scream series, uh, I must say that I find myself somewhat disheartened by the latest casting news for Scream 7. With myriad horror franchises finding innovative ways to continue their stories while still keeping things fresh and engaging, um, it seems that the creators of Scream have opted to tread familiar ground once more, focusing on Sidney's life instead of exploring new characters or storylines. Um, the recent developments within the Scream movie series um, suggest that the storyline for Scream 7 may not be effectively resolved. Although Scream 7 won't premiere in cinemas until 2026, its production journey has been a challenging one. The 2022 reboot and the 2023 release Scream 6 were both commercial and critical triumphs, earning positive reviews and raking in substantial box office revenue despite the absence of Neve Campbell's character, Sidney Prescott. However, it appears that the good fortune of the Scream series has come to an end with the commencement of Scream 7's pre-production phase. Uh, in the original version, it was stated that Melissa Barrera, who starred in Scream 2022 and Scream 6, was let go from Scream 7 before Jenna Ortega, who screams them and helped for more significant response. The director of Happy Death Day, um, Christopher Landon, also left the project, causing the studio to start over. Now, the original Scream screenwriter, Kevin Williamson, is taking on directing duties, and Neve Campbell's character, Sidney, is back as the heroine for Scream 7. However, the production appears to still be facing trouble. The Scream movies follow a simple timeline, but it seems that in an effort to replace Ortega and Barrera's characters, Tara and Sam, Scream 7 is set to introduce one major change that could potentially complicate things. Sidney's daughter is a clumsy Tara and Sam replacement for Scream 7. The Scream series already reinvented itself with a new generation of stars based on Variety's report. It appears that Isabel May is being considered to portray uh, Sidney's daughter in Scream 7. Uh, this seems like an effort to fill the roles previously held by Sam and Kara, given that Ortega and Barrera were introduced as the new main characters in Scream, a reboot. It introduced the Carpenter sisters halfway through the film before bringing back Sidney. Replacing Sidney with Sam and Tara was a strategy used to accommodate Campbell's absence in Scream 6, but this approach won't work here because it involves significant plot adjustments, including May as Sidney's daughter might not aid the sequel given the complexities involved in its execution. Suddenly disclosing that Sidney has a daughter seems like an obvious tactic to replicate the strategy of where a fresh heroine was introduced for modern audiences. However, the issue with all of those is that Sam and Tara were those heroines, and the last two movies in the series heavily relied on their relationship. The franchise had already demonstrated that Sidney's story was complete, and her role as the final girl had been passed on, making it challenging for to prove she is still essential to the series. Furthermore, casting Neve Campbell's daughter exacerbates this predicament as it introduces another complicating factor. The
Scream 7. Casting Sidney's daughter makes her timeline more complicated. Um, Sidney's daughter needed to be mentioned before Scream 7. And in simpler terms, since Isabel May is currently 24 years old, and her character in Scream is supposed to be a teenager, the timeline for Scream 7 uh, would have to be set at least by the year 2040 so that May's character can be a teenager. This is because Sid May's character was seen pushing a stroller in Scream 2022, which implies she had a child around that time. If we consider Neve Campbell's character, Sidney Prescott, she would need to be 2 decades older than her portrayal in 2022, which could potentially look strange due to lack of visible aging. In the upcoming movie Scream 7, if Neve Campbell's character doesn't undergo a significant age change, her on-screen daughter will have rapidly grown from an infant to a young adult within approximately 2 years. Time leap alone wouldn't explain this growth, since it would imply Sidney herself has also aged. Uh, the events of Scream 2022 took place 25 years after the original Scream, placing Sidney around 18 at that time and approximately 43 in Scream 2022. This means that Campbell, who was 48 then, portrayed a 43-year-old Sidney for Scream 7. Campbell would need to play a character around 67, but she is only 51 now. Such a timeline adjustment would seem implausible. Or Scream 7's casting highlights. They're about the franchise's biggest story problem. Scream 7's timeline changes wouldn't add up. The main issue with casting Sidney's daughter is the fact that Sidney's Scream franchise story arc had already reached its natural conclusion years ago. Sidney's characterization has remained stagnant, arguably, since, wherein she found out the truth about her mother, uncovered the true mastermind of the original trilogy's killings, and defeated him. Was a fun victory lap, but Sidney literally pointed out that the killers were only tangentially connected to her and mostly looking for fame and attention, and it needed to be the final movie because Sidney's story ended a long time ago. It's odd that Scream 4 didn't mention Sidney had a partner. But Scream 2022 surprisingly revealed she was with Mark Kincaid from Scream 3 off screen. And if Scream 7 were to reveal that she has a daughter in her 20s, it would emphasize that Sidney hasn't been the main character for over a decade, which was emphasized in Scream 2022 and Scream 6 with Tara and Sam, and then in this plot could have made sense if those sequels didn't exist, but it seems confusing now. Instead, the Sidney-focused storyline in Scream 7 feels like a weak diversion from the original direction. What Scream 7 should be about new characters, not Sidney and her family. And then it sounds like it would read all of them, and all of them are like in a category to it. If we're considering another installment for the Scream series, it would be more effective to introduce fresh characters rather than continuing Sidney's storyline. Although the franchise had potential to revitalize Sidney's narrative after Scream 4, where she had been away from the limelight for just one film, the time for that approach has passed. The opening kill scene in Scream 7 suggests this, as it wouldn't make sense to eliminate a recurring character like Mark, Gale, or Kirby at the outset, leaving few legacy characters left. And on the other hand, the demise of a new character carries no weight. The Scream franchise finds itself in a difficult predicament as Sidney's storyline has lost its allure, yet the departures of Ortega and Barrera make it challenging to introduce new and characters as her replacements. Fast forwarding the timeline to have Sidney as a grandmother in the 2040s seems unrealistic, or the series could disregard recent events from Scream 2022 regarding Sidney's personal life. Alternatively, the creators could have opted to focus on new characters instead of centering on Sidney, again, for Scream 7. But they chose not to